Hi, I'm Dan Sweet, Director of Public Relations and Communications for HAI. Welcome to our At Work webinar. We have a great topic today. Let me get this shared here real quick. Our Advanced Air Mobility Future, the Global Perspective. We'll get things started in just about a minute. We want to let people get in the door. Okay, we do appreciate that you took time out of your busy schedule to join us today. We know that there's lots of things going on around the world with rotorcraft operations. And so we are grateful that you did take a few minutes to join us today. Today's webinar is a recorded webinar. Our speakers are international, so we had to coordinate a time when we could gather everybody together for a recording, which unfortunately was quite early in the morning here, so we didn't want to bring everybody on at 6 a.m. Hope you understand, we will make some accommodations for that. That said, the speakers that you will see on the recording today are Chris Martino, who is Senior Director of Operations and International Affairs for HAI. We have Scott McKenzie, who is the Chair of the New Zealand Helicopter Association and a consultant with Pappas Consulting. We have Peter Muller, who is the Chair of the European Helicopter Association. Hiro Anishi, who is the Chair of the Association for Promotion of Helicopter Industry in Japan. And he is also the head of civil sales for Airbus helicopters in Japan. We have Eduardo Dominguez Puerta, who is the Chief Commercial Officer for Vertical Aerospace. This is normally an interactive webinar. We do want to maintain some interaction, so we will continue to accept your questions today. Please use the question module at the bottom of the screen or on the side of your screen. And then what we'll do is we'll try to get a response back to you as best we can via email. I can't guarantee it'll happen before next week. This is a big holiday weekend here in the US. And so we will do our best to get the responses back to you as soon as possible. That's for today only. Please don't expect that we can always, we'll always be able to do that. Obviously, this webinar is being recorded, and so we will make this recording available to all the subscribers, the attendees, as quickly as we possibly can. That will probably happen tomorrow or Tuesday morning at the latest. We do appreciate it, and let's go ahead and get things started.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I appreciate that. And welcome, everybody. It is my honor and my pleasure to introduce our panelists today. And we will start with Peter Muller. Peter is the chairman of the European Helicopter Association, and he's going to provide some perspective on things that are going on with advanced air mobility in Europe. So I see that Peter has joined us. Welcome, Peter. Appreciate it.
Hi, Chris. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to this international audience about the advanced air mobility situation in Europe. And I can see the slides have started, that's fine. So let's right away move to the second slide. And let me start with the first topic. So this is regarding the infrastructure in Europe. So to my knowledge, there is no official infrastructure of vertiports in Europe existing yet. However, recent developments in France have shown that we are not far away from the planning of the first vertiports in Europe. Next slide, please. As you all are aware, the next Olympic Games are scheduled to take place in Paris, France in 2024. Already in 2019, the group ADP, formerly Aéroports de Paris, and ARTP, the Parisian Transport Authority, have announced jointly the project to launch a first eVTOL service during the Olympic Games. Pontoise Aerodrome had been awarded as the experiment center for eVTOL in view of being able to prepare AAM service for the next Olympic Games. The plan includes the use of 36 eVTOLs plus drones for TV reporting. However, More recently, the official communication about the new vertical mobility for Olympic Games mentions no more than tests between 2 points. The heliport of Paris is again listed as a possible experimental vertiport, and the use of electric hydrofoil boats have made their entry into the official discourse as an alternative option to consider facing the traffic jam. Next slide, please. In the UK, the government backs world first program to build air architecture for air taxis and delivery drones. A one-stop vertiport renamed the smallest airport in the world is to be built in Coventry later this year with the Hyundai machine mock-up to demonstrate the concept to the public. Go to the next slide, please. Let's talk about policy. I have not yet identified a comprehensive European strategy to develop and scale the European AAM industry. As mentioned before, the UK government is already behind some research projects to tackle key areas of the AAM industry. Project funds so far include using drones to support the national air health system and emergency services in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. Investing in the future of air mobility and technologies that will allow full electric flight in the UK. Addressing challenges for the wider aviation system that new aircraft will operate within and including key infrastructure and air traffic management. Investigating the use of hydrogen as zero-emission fuel source of future aircraft and understanding the infrastructure requirements. A pop-up airport project that will create the world's smallest airports that can be deployed, for example, to support disaster emergencies. Next slide, please. Let's talk about regulations. The European Union is putting in place a comprehensive regulatory framework to ensure orderly and safe operations of UAM in the European cities. For instance, it has recently adopted a regulation on U-Space to organize how the UAM aircraft will fly in the airspace above the cities. More regulations can be expected to ensure that the risks related to safety, security, including cybersecurity, noise, environmental impact, and visual pollution are reduced. Urban air mobility will first be complementing means of mobility. It will start slowly at low scale and unlikely to significantly reduce congestion on the ground. It can cater, however, for a faster transport in emergency situations, for instance. The European Safety Aviation Agency has started creating the UAM regulatory framework, building notably on the results of the 2021 UAM study on societal acceptance. Some building blocks have already been achieved. On airworthiness, EASA has been the first in the world to publish in 2019 a special condition to authorize small VTOL aircraft operations. In 2020, for light unmanned aircraft systems operating in medium risk situations, and in 2021 guidelines on the design verification of UAS operating in the specific category. On operations and pilot licensing in early 2019, EASA has launched preparatory activities that will lead to rules for the pilots and remote pilots of these vehicles, their operators, and for the infrastructure, that is, vertiports operators. On airspace integration, EASA has prepared a world's first U-Space UTM regulatory package, which will be adopted by or has been adopted by the European Commission on April 22nd. And this package will become applicable early 2023 and will enable the safe integration of UAS operations in urban environment. On the research and development side, EASA is also engaged in a large number of projects. There is one called AMULET, Air Mobility urban large experimental demonstrations, which will allow UAM stakeholders to specify various use cases applicable to logistics and urban transport of passengers, to integrate urban air mobility environment, to demonstrate UAS ground and airborne platforms, and finally, to assess safety and security. SAFIR-MED is a European project to ensure safe integration of advanced use-based services focusing on medical air mobility. COROS XUAM is a concept of operations for European use-based services extended to urban air mobility. It's a 24 months, very large-scale demonstration project, which will demonstrate how use-based services and solutions could support integrated urban air mobility flight operations, allowing eVTOLs, UAS, and other airspace users, unmanned and manned, to operate safely, securely, and sustainably and efficiently in a controlled and fully integrated airspace. AirMoor and EASA may get involved in other additional research projects, such as so-called GOV 2.0, which focuses on the safe, secure, and sustainable integration of unmanned aerial vehicle and air taxi operations in urban airspace based on results of the CESAR joint undertaking Gulf of Finland use-based project, which was successfully demonstrated the safe airspace integration of unmanned air vehicles in summer 2019. The Gulf of Finland project 2.0 intends to safely, securely, and sustainably demonstrate operational validity of servicing combined UAS, eVTOL, and manned operations in a unified, dense urban airspace using AAM and use-based service provider and systems. Next slide, please. So what does the public think about UAM? Citizens' acceptance and future UAM users' confidence will be essential to the successful deployment of urban air mobility in Europe. EASA conducted a comprehensive study on the social acceptance of UAM operations across the European Union to guide this work. The study was carried out together with the consulting company McKenzie and the Arab Sound Lab between November 2020 and April 2021. The members of our association, of the European Helicopter Association, participated in this survey. Based on thorough research, literature review, local market analysis, surveys, and interviews, the study examined the attitudes, the expectations, and concerns of the European citizens with respect to urban air mobility and revealed interesting insights that will help EASA to prepare the future regulatory framework. Few takeaways from the survey. European citizens initially and spontaneously expressed a positive attitude towards UAM, seeing it as a new and attractive means of mobility, and a majority are ready to try it out. The notion of general public interest is a determining factor for the acceptance. Use cases for the benefit of the community, such as medical or emergency transport or connecting remote areas, are better supported. The main benefits expected from the UAM are faster, cleaner, and extended connectivity. However, when encouraged to reflect upon the concrete consequence of potential UAM operations in their city, EU citizens indicated that they want to limit their own exposure to safety, noise, security, and environmental impact. Safety concerns come first, but the study also showed that citizens trust the current aviation safety levels and would be reassured if these levels were applied to UAM. Noise was the second main concern expressed. The study indicated that the level of annoyance versus acceptance would vary with the familiarity of the sound, the distance, the duration, and the repetition of the sound. UAM was seen as a good option to improve the local environment footprint through reduced urban traffic congestion and better local air quality, provided that it does not impact wildlife. The results are also demonstrated. The results also demonstrated limited trust in the security and cybersecurity of UAM, which would require threat prevention measures. The integration of UAM into the existing air and ground infrastructure must respect residents' quality of life and the cultural heritage of old European cities. Finally, local residents and authorities felt directly affected by the deployment of UAM and want to engage and play an active role in its implementation. Next slide, please. What are the future challenges and gaps? So beside two major startups in Europe, that's Volocopter and Lilium, who were able to attract numerous investors, there is Airbus working on the City Airbus presently, and it has done its first flights. Volocopter has done test flights and demonstrations, but Lilium not at all. Volocopter expects certification by early 2023 and is looking to launch operations in 2023. Lilium aims to start operation in 2025. Infrastructure, vertiports, and their rules for certification are missing. Nothing is known or specified yet about power supplies at vertiports. Above mentioned research projects and need to provide answers to ensuring safety related to certification and operation of the new tools and safe integration of advanced air mobility in the existing airspace, as well as to security, including cybersecurity. Another important issue, and this concludes my presentation, is to convince existing helicopter operations on how to integrate advanced air mobility into their operational portfolio. To my opinion, they are the ones who do have the expertise in safe aviation operation and should be the ones to bring this new type of air mobility to success. The last slide. Thank you very much. This ends my presentation. I thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Back to you.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate the outstanding presentation. There certainly is a lot going on in Europe, and I'm glad you were able to share that with us today. So next we have Mr. Hiro Onishi. And Mr. Onishi is the chairman of the Association of Promotion of Helicopter Industry in Japan. And we welcome you with us here today, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you, Chris. My name is Hiro Nishi. I'm from Japan. So I'd like to share the screen. Sorry, I'd like to start my screen.
We can see your screen, yes.
Okay. Right. So I'd like to start to explaining you about the flying vehicles and the helicopter market in Japan. So the situation in Japan is that for air mobility revolution was late 2018, and the aim of to create this council is to improve the speed and the convenience of moving people and goods, developing new industries, and enter into a global market by a Japanese team. So they are discussing the development of technologies, systems, and regulations by public and private entities together. Council secretariats are Manufacturing Industries Bureau of METI, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, and JCAB from Ministry of Land Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism, MLIT. So the council consists of the members from public, METI, MRIT, and other related ministries and agencies. And private sectors comes from experts, aircraft manufacturers, and other service suppliers, business operators, and groups. So when they created their council, they have targeted the roadmap as of December 2018 for the entry business services in 2023. So they have an organization for a working level meeting for both use case study group and technical working groups. That is aircraft safety standard, airman licensing, and operation safety standard. And they have established a roadmap towards air mobility revolution. So target in mid-2020s to commence business services. Target year is 2023. And for 2030s, they consider to expand utilities using new vehicles. And this slide represents more detailed information about their project. So this is today's utilization image plan by businesses. So their plan is to start pilot service of flying vehicles around 2023. And in 2025, they try to full-scale launch of transportation services by flying vehicles. Among this short-term period, they intend to use 2 to 5-seater vehicles, multi-rotors, eVTOL, but within a very limited area, some area only, within a limited area, up to 10 to 50 kilometers range for cargo transportation or very limited passenger transport or sightseeing flight in the remote islands or mountainous areas. And from from late 2020s, they are going to expand transportation services by flying vehicles, and they would like to use these vehicles for EMS service. And around 2030s, they expect further expansion for long distance, high frequency, improved on-demand performance. So the working groups consider the priority is to consider in the short term how to deal with these target dates. So this is the result of working groups studies as of end of fiscal year 2020. This is actually in March 2021. So aircraft safety standard working group categorize eVTOL as aircraft under the existing aviation law and regulation. Type of vehicles to be considered is in the short term, eVTOL, max takeoff weight over 3 tons, less than 9 seats, pilot onboarding and non-boarding, etc. And based on the types and the performance of eVTOL, they have tentatively set design requirements, and they are going to challenge from next year to analyze the design requirements, survey industrial planning, define the items to be considered as safety standards. The other technical groups, like airman licensing or operation safety standards group, assume short-term use cases. So they consider to start from the easier target. So let me share with you some move from the startup company for aircraft manufacturing. Sorry, it's not aircraft anymore. It's a drone or automobile, no more. We can call it as new vehicles, like flying vehicles. So this SkyDrive Inc. was founded by the members of the voluntary group Cultivator since 2012. So they are the members from the automobile industries or aircraft or drone industries. So their target is to start business with flying cars around 2025 and for automatic driving of flying cars after 2030. They have made a successful public flight test with manned flying vehicle last year. Let me introduce one more new aircraft manufacturing startup company based in Tokyo. They are developing commercially available personal eVTOL machine called MK5. That is planned to start delivering in 2022 in the United States. This company is called Tetra Aviation. So they have already presented their prototype at one of the US air show, and they have presented their targeted specification in their website. One more information from Japan is that the Japanese government has a plan to use flying cars for transportation of people at the Osaka Kansai Expo, planned in 2025 to achieve 2030's full-scale service. So in a nutshell, let me summarize flying vehicles in Japan. So public-private council was established and has been active since 2018. Roadmap of December 2018 defines entry business service in 2023, when they focus on goods transportation in remote islands, sightseeing flight at a tourist spot, and passenger transportation from point to point, but within a limited area. Fully electric vehicle for 10 kilometers flight range. eVTOL will be regarded as aircraft under the aviation law. So this is the key from a governmental point of view. And working on the requirements and issues of pilots and the maintenance personnel and operational safety standards, assuming short term. They will formulate guidelines for full-scale test flight that is planned after 2022. And Japanese startup companies are developing flying cars, and Japanese government studies to use flying cars for transportation of people at the Osaka Kansai Expo in 2025. Now, I would like to speak about the relationship between helicopter industries and flying vehicles. So our activities and challenges. So our target is to establish new helicopter business and discussion for issue resolution on the existing helicopter business. So we consider there are three main common themes to expand the use of existing helicopters and achieve the great success of flying vehicles in Japan. So first point is pilot shortage. Second point is expansion, promotion and maintenance for heliports and future vertiports. And third one is operation for low altitude IFR and point on space. That's all from Japan. Thank you very much for your time.
And thank you, Hiro. We appreciate that informative, very informative presentation. Now, I would like to turn the camera over to our New Zealand partner today is Mr. Scott McKenzie, and Scott is the chairman of the New Zealand Helicopter Association. So thank you for being with us today, Scott. I will turn the camera over to you, and thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks very much, Chris and Dan, and thanks to the informative presentations from Peter and Hiro. I have departed from using a PowerPoint, and just like to talk about a few things that are happening down here in New Zealand. As you may be aware by my facial here, we're in lockdown here for the Delta outbreak. We've been very fortunate over the last 18 months to escape most of the issues that most of the countries that are listening in and presenting have been going through. So we've been thinking of you. But equally, as part of that, is like where New Zealand is a small country in the southern Pacific Ocean that is separated from everyone with a large body of water, and we're only 5 million people. So we are very small, and it is very expensive for us to implement any air mobility on a scale. But it also provides us with some opportunities in the fact that our civil aviation is enabling innovation and attraction along with some of our government agencies, and looking at how they can advance the industry and also the use of air mobility to assist in moving people around and also cargo. So some of the processes we've got in place, transport outcome framework, looking at identifying the key contributors to resilience and security, economic prosperity, environmental sustainability, inclusive access, and healthy and safe people. So that sort of looks right across the area, but it looks at what are the transportation opportunities that can happen in there. And as part of that, there's also another body of work going, is the unmanned air traffic management. Is a long-term solution of integration in New Zealand, but that's about at least 5 years away. And also there's some airspace integration trials, a program which is run at the moment, which is assisting some of the larger players which are in New Zealand, such as Whiskero, Dawn Aerospace, and sort of associated with it is Merlin Labs, who are more doing autonomous aircraft with currently with a manned pilot at the moment. But that builds on the back of Rocket Labs, which many people would have heard about. It is operating from New Zealand and now the States. It's a New Zealand company that's sending small payloads into space from the East Cape of the North Island, and they're doing it very successfully and has been enabled by government agencies. So taking that, we're looking at trying to enable air mobility in New Zealand, and some of the elements that help that I've just sort of talked about. But there's some real challenges that we're sort of seeing. We've got 125 Part 102 operators in New Zealand, so the Ministry of Transport has just issued a discussion document which is enabling drone integration. That's talking about the below 15 kilo up to 25 kilo and then greater than 25 kilo. So I'm going to concentrate on greater than 25 kilo through the rest of this talk. And many of the challenges that Peter and Hiro have talked about just in the last 10 or 15 minutes are very much faced by us here in New Zealand. And what, in some ways, what we're seeing is how are they going to be operated? What are the regulations going to comply with? And what does the marketplace actually want? So it's looking at that and looking at some of our legislation with respect to the Privacy Act, our Department of Conservation Act, and some of our criminal acts are being looked at as well. But what we're finding is some of the AAM are looking at requiring councils or government to build the infrastructure to enable this new technology to operate. And one of the questions we're having in the debates that we're having sort of internally in our own organisations is, what are the capabilities that they provide that are different to helicopters? So one would be fully autonomous, but we know we've seen fully autonomous helicopters lately, but we're finding that some of the operators who are developing this technology are looking that they want to change the airspace. We have a significant amount of Class G uncontrolled airspace in New Zealand. want to control airspace down to ground level, so across the entire country. Everything will require ADS-B, and that will mean and some form of communication, ADS-B out, and some form of communication. So that will be no Nordo aircraft at all, and possibly a transfer of wealth from helicopters to this new concept of operation, which is very similar to helicopters. And there are only very sort of niche areas where we see as achieving anything that can't be done without a helicopter. So that sort of frames what we're looking at. So infrastructure, again, I'm not going to cover this in detail because Peter and Hiro have put forward some elements there, but the heliports are pretty much the basis of that, with a significant requirement for power. And with the introduction of electric vehicles, our power infrastructure doesn't really have the capacity to provide for that. So how does it provide for the significant power requirements from autonomous or air vehicles and air mobility to support those skyports? And then along with that infrastructure and also the challenges, one of the challenges I'll be talking about later on is the safety challenge. Infrastructure such as heliports in the middle of New York City. In 1977, there was the Pan Am S-61 helicopter accident, which then prevented a lot of helicopter operations into the city. And then the seasonal, there's some seasonal requirements as well around batteries and how those are used. And so it's lending itself to a hybrid model, but certainly in the greater than 45 degrees and below 5 degrees, anything that is electrically powered is going to be very challenging. Certification, very green there, but we feel that it's going to have to build off the certification requirements of fixed wing and helicopters. And so finally, the last little point that I want to talk to is about, which has been covered already, is around market acceptance. And I'd like to put a shout out to the Massey School of Aviation and Isaac Hastings, who's one of the lecturers there, and one of the students, Sim, who have a study underway that is looking at what is the market acceptance for air mobility. And they've had about over 300 responses, but credible responses and full responses in around 264. So it's quite a good number. And the Uber Air video is sort of the basis of what they're looking at to frame the context. Interestingly, some of the findings in that study, which haven't necessarily been released, and I'm not going to, don't want to burst their bubble, but they've allowed me to share some of the insights. Nearly half, or 45% of people have never heard of this technology. And of the 55% that have, they only know little bits and see it as an alternative to conventional transportation. So there's some big challenges to overcome there with the education part. People would consider buying a flight. They like the concept, but it might not actually be something that they would do. It'd be an event that they would go, they would use the technology, but not a regular thing. The overwhelming element that came out, people are very concerned about safety. And as I mentioned there, the 1977 crash, Pan Am crash and helicopter crash in New York City, that concern comes through of safety concerns about what happens when there's an engine failure. People are also concerned about security, but less so. So therefore, if it's people are looking at using it when things are urgent. So urgent business travel, emergency to travel to a hospital, and those are the two elements that sort of really came through. And the third element, which might be a sightseeing trip. Interestingly, if they were offered to fly across the city for 15 minutes, 20% wouldn't fly across the city on a 15-minute transit at all, doesn't matter what the price is. But the price point is actually quite low, where people would think that most of the people thought that $100 or less for a 15-minute flight across the city, that would encourage about 50% of the people that would fly to fly, which is nowhere near the cost of a helicopter to fly across the city. And with the development and infrastructure costs and all of the direct operating costs, it's hard to see that it's not going to be in excess of $200 to head across the city. So the mode comparison that they're comparing with is not necessarily just a vehicle, it's more of a limousine and better. So it will be very challenging, noting that the study is still underway and all of the numbers are being crunched, but the price and influencing factors, the last influencing factor, which is around the environment. The environment tends to be a middle-class luxury, and when it came down to whether or not someone would use it if it was good for the environment, less than 2% of people would have used it just for that fact. So an interesting thing that we need to get our heads around for the elements of market acceptance. And I think, indicative of what we're seeing now is like initial, a lot of companies like DHL, UPS, Amazon were very keen on introducing drones for their packaging. And now they're sort of looking at not pursuing it. So where does that place the AAM for the future? And I'll be looking forward to exploring that in our question and answer session in the future, towards the end of this presentation. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you for that very informative presentation, Scott. We appreciate it. And then finally, our final panelist is an OEM, an equipment manufacturer. And what we have it's actually a privilege to have you with us today. We have Eduardo Dominguez Puerta, and he is the Chief Commercial Officer for Vertical Aerospace, which is located out of Bristol, UK. So, Eduardo, thank you for being with us today, and we appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks to all the HAI and the different helicopter associations around the world for inviting us, and a big thanks as well to all the audience for their interest. I would like to start this discussion from an OEM point of view by describing something that is happening that I found particularly interesting, is the different positioning, strategic positioning of all the different players on this space. And why do I want to bring this point? Companies like Vertical Aerospace, we define ourselves as a real OEM, providing vehicles and vehicle-related services to different customer operators, whereas you can find as well other players that have probably a more aggressive and expansive strategy, not just to build the vehicles, but also to try to operate them, and in some cases to go into the B2C. So I'm representing the OEMs, but actually I don't know if I'm representing the strategic positioning of all of them. Why did we choose that strategy at Vertical? Listening to some of you, I think we all agree that it's really difficult already to design, manufacture, certify, and industrialize a vehicle. It's actually going to be as difficult to learn how to operate this and to try to build that B2C interface and provide services. And, if you try to boil the ocean, you will need a lot of energy and a lot of cash. Actually, we don't believe that an industry is built by a single company. So we definitely believe that working with customers is going to be the key to success. Which brings me to the second point, which is we are no longer talking about the same typical customer base. The segmentation is going to be different, probably much broader. And helicopter customer were typical operators. Here we're going to be addressing helicopter operators. Here we're going to be addressing airliners. We're going to be addressing leasing companies. We might be addressing hotels, tourist operators and groups, medical services, cargo companies, which creates a very heterogeneous customer base. However, all those customers, from a point of view, will need to have a deep understanding, knowledge, and experience on aeronautical operations for this industry to flourish. I think they are the best position, and it was mentioned before, to be the ones to operate these vehicles, because they have already a huge experience of what that means. So I think I would like to coin a term that is called technological Darwinism, and it takes the principle of evolution of a species, and based on technology, what we see is that there are different features of these new vehicles that will actually improve some of those existing technologies. We mentioned safety, and how the avoidance of single point of failures is going to be a big value for these vehicles. We talked about direct operating cost, which will be much lower than current helicopters. And we talked about the sustainability aspect, with zero emissions and also lower noise levels, which are, features that I think are very key for customer and for societal acceptance. So all this being said, at the same time, these vehicles will not have the performance that today helicopters might have in terms of range, which will limit their uses at the beginning, but with the promise of an ever developing capability and technologies on batteries, etc., that will increase over time, which will as well increase the total addressable market. So why do we think that this OEM positioning is so important? When you're designing these vehicles, you can build a jack of all trades. You can try to maximize the range of the vehicles, but actually you might be building a suboptimal vehicle for a particular mission. And what we believe is that these vehicles will really need to be designed to mission. And I always give the example of Formula One cars. If you could add double capacity on the petrol you can put on a Formula One car, so that it will have the capacity to run 2 races, you're already knowing that that car will lose the race. And I think this is something very similar that will happen with these vehicles. If you have an over-engineered or an over-capable vehicle that is performing a much shorter range mission, you might end up being suboptimal. So this is why this co-creation, product definition, and feedback from customer base is going to be so important. And we believe that at the end of the day, what is going to emerge is not just a single vehicle, but it's a portfolio of vehicles that will be dedicated to specific missions. So I think that gives an overview on how this market is on the make. At the same time, we all reckon that as OEMs, we have and we face very similar challenges. Some of them have been mentioned before. The basic one is, to really come to a point where these technologies are matured, are applicable to the planes, we're able to design, test, and certify them. I think that is the first challenge that we face. But very soon, the second challenge is emerging, which is the industrialization at scale, which will require as well additional capabilities and different ways of working to what the traditional aviation industry has been doing over the last years. And probably that scaling will need some other industry input, like for instance, automotive or other industries that have traditionally manufactured at a higher scale. The second challenge that we face is the regulatory framework. And on that one, we really thank all regulators across the world. I think they have done a big effort and they have achieved a lot over the last years. However, and as mentioned before, there are still a lot of open questions around the certification requirements for the operations, for the infrastructure, for the pilot training, and even for airspace management. And actually, we believe that all those regulatory bodies should actually secure the resources that are needed for this, which actually means an increase of activity and workload for all of them. And they are the first ones that need to be equipped. So I think that is also a bit of support to those regulatory bodies. When we talk to them, sometimes they are very thin, and they would probably need more resource in terms of manpower and probably in terms of governmental support. That will enable as well portability, which is another challenge as OEM that we face. We have different origins. Some of my OEM colleagues are based in the US, some are based in Europe, some might be based in Asia, in Japan, etc. We all have a regulatory framework depending on the country we're based in. And usually that is going to be the first certification requirements that we're going to fulfill. However, we really urge and ask, please, all these regulatory bodies, you also need to collaborate together. You also need to work together so that we make sure that, EASA, CAA, FAA, GCAB, whoever, are talking to each other and are trying to enable that portability that actually will enable our export and our scaling. So I think that summarizes those regulatory challenges. Of course, we also need policymaker support, public acceptance. You mentioned before the study on societal acceptance that was done by EASA. I think we have created the awareness, but still we need to continue gaining that acceptance. I think some of the uses on medical services, social services are going to enable that. But I think also, the access to some of these services, not so expensive as maybe helicopter rides were before, are going to push public to start using. And actually, that will definitely scale that acceptance, because people will be able to benefit from these vehicles, from these services. At the same time, I think sustainability is an important point. We have seen how much policymakers are supporting and have been supporting the introduction of electric vehicles on the road. I think we should also claim that support for aerial vehicles. I think we're probably not going to make a huge impact on the level of emissions in aviation, because most of that is coming from bigger planes and long haul. But I think we also need to be fair and claim what we might bring, which is the displacement of the use of some of those carbon emitting vehicles that might be on the road, and actually transport people with new means, new technologies that could create, carbon credits economy, and somehow keep on pushing for the decarbonization of aviation. Mentioned before as well, infrastructure. That is also a big important piece, necessary piece. We believe that infrastructure shouldn't be exclusive to OEMs, like airports are not exclusive to OEMs. We believe that part of that infrastructure should be publicly funded and partially or totally publicly owned, because that will secure that neutrality. and that will probably reduce the amount of investment that will need to be done in every ecosystem. We also need standards. We also need regulations there to define the, charging mechanisms that are compatible with different OEM vehicles. We also need to secure, a big relationship with all energy companies to make sure that the power requirements and those installations are properly equipped. And we know that that takes time. We are all aiming at an entry into service in 25, 26, so mid of this decade. And we're already in 21. We have the upcoming 3-4 years to really build up all that existing infrastructure that actually needs to be useful and needs to be based on the mobility patterns of the different communities, so that we create networks that are helpful, useful, and that can be integrated with the rest of multimodal systems that the different regions, different cities have. Airspace management is also one of the fronts where we all collectively need to work. How the low airspace is regulated, how that low airspace is integrated with other more classical airspace classes and categories, and how do we make sure that all those ANSPs and bodies that are managing traffic in our skies are able to scale, with the support of digitalization, and really make a leap on the air traffic management industry that I must say has remained a bit classic in some places, and probably will benefit as well from a digitalization effort. So I think that resumes a bit the challenges that we face, and I would like to finish, with a message to all those customers. We are really looking forward to discussing with you, and we're really looking forward to understanding the uses that you want to give to these vehicles, so that we're able to design and produce a vehicle that is needed and that is a commercial success. Thank you very much, and back to you, Chris.
Outstanding. Thank you, Eduardo. I appreciate that. We have time here just for a couple of questions. And so I would ask that all our panelists turn your cameras back on, and we'll go through just a couple of questions there. I think we have just a little bit of time, so I don't want to waste it. So we'll get right into it. So I'm going to pull just a couple of threads, because Eduardo just talked about it, and we also had some input from our association panelists. But I want to pull a thread on the infrastructure portion of it. So we talked about some of the challenges associated with the whole vertiport versus heliport. But I guess my question is this, and I'll start with Eduardo as the manufacturer. What in order to advance the speed of which these vehicles hit the market, what portion do you believe of the existing heliport infrastructure, current heliports, could be used to help kick off this new technology?
I think OEMs, we need to integrate existing helicopter-related infrastructure as part of our product definition requirements, because I believe we should try to maximize the use of existing infrastructure. Our vehicles are going to have a weight of around 3.1 tons, which equates to a light helicopter, but probably are going to have a disk loading that is higher, that is more in line with an intermediate helicopter with some effects on downwash and other things. So I think we should try to include all those requirements as part of our product definition. Usually those vertiports don't require additional surface on urban areas. They already exist. And what we need to do is to make sure that the power requirements, the handling surfaces, the safety surfaces, are all integrated so that they can enable the operation. We also believe that those infrastructures will look very differently depending on the node of the network that will represent. And we can imagine, bigger bases close to airports where power requirements are going to be higher, where more vehicles are going to operate. And we can imagine nodes on those networks that might have less traffic, that might need less power requirements, or even no power requirements, because we can operate on a cycle where with one full battery load, we can do different hops. So all of that will need to be studied network by network. But I believe we would benefit from a catalog of standard solutions that would define a minimum set of requirements for those different types. And that could be taken as industry standards to be provided to different, civil engineering companies, infrastructure builders, or infrastructure operators, so that we have a common reference like the airports have all around the world, or like the heliports have all around the world today. So reusability, an upgrade, and eventually customization to the use, throughput, and traffic of the node they represent. That would be my feedback to that question.
Outstanding. Thank you. Appreciate that answer. I'll go ahead and just, I'm just picking randomly here, but I'll pick Peter. Peter, from the association perspective, from the perspective of operators, how feasible is it for the existing structure to be used to support both the legacy and the new air vehicles coming in?
Yeah, Chris, unfortunately, the majority of the heliports we do have in Europe are heliports which are established at hospitals. So they are normally only used for EMS operations. And even now, they are not available for public transport. They are really reserved to HAMS operations. And I see in the future also that they will not be made available for the use of UAMs. And additionally, you would have the problem of the installation concerning power supply and so on. And there may be one exception where UAMs may be used on these platforms, on these helipads, and this is in case of emergency medical service. Then I can see a possibility that you will have a parallel kind of operation, on those helipads with normal helicopters and also with UAMs delivering the same services.
Outstanding, thank you. I'm going to switch questions here and go over to Hiro and to Scott. And I want to talk a little bit about your perception on certification from the operator's perspective. Again, I think Hiro, you mentioned very eloquently that it's all based on what the individual states are doing. I mean, just because somebody abides by ICAO doesn't necessarily mean all those rules and regulations, the SARPs, are being used equally across all the states. So from your perspective, Hiro, what similarities exist? Can the existing certification structure be used to create the certification for these new vehicles, or are we looking at something new that is needed?
Okay, so in my opinion, as I presented during my presentation, Japanese government trying to set up this with a safety standard as early as possible, but due to the fact that industries tries to start operation as early as possible in 2-3 years time frame, that's why they try to start from the conservative way, that is existing laws and regulations. So in Japan, for the moment, even for the helicopters, we are not allowed to land anywhere for normal civil private helicopters. So we have some restrictions. So the government thinks that the easiest way is to start from this conservative approach, but about this. And so certification as well is the same. But they are now looking at the move in the United States and in the European governments, authorities, that is the FAA and EASA, and they are trying to make a decision how to move about this. But I think that they will start from the existing certification aspects.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. Scott, same question from your perspective in New Zealand. Can we use the old system for certification, or do we need to come up with something new?
Nothing much to add really, although in the respect that I think there's some really good elements of the old system, and noting that they're looking at safety and crashworthiness and reliability. So using the framework is there might be some new elements that they can add in, but I think a combination of FAR 27, 29, along with maybe some 23, 25, and then some new elements put in there. The more new elements that you put in, the more debate that has to happen, and the more uncertainty, and the longer for certification. So I think the more that you can use the existing certification, the better. And we need to, I think it goes right across this, we need to integrate as much as possible, not segregate from existing technology. Integrate, I think Eduardo said it really nicely.
Outstanding. Thank you, sir. We have time for just a couple more questions. I'm going to very quickly throw one back over here at Eduardo. Eduardo, you've got three of the leading associations in the world right here with us today. I guess my question to you is this: what help could the associations, the industry associations, provide to the OEM, the manufacturers, in order to help you with your efforts to get your aircraft into the market?
I think you're doing already, and I must thank that. If I had to ask for something, and it might look a bit, detail, I think you could evolve your association's name to be more inclusive of this new type of vehicles, and maybe call them Vertical Association International or whatever. So it's not just limited to helicopters, because we see that you want us to be part of the family, and we feel so. But sometimes these little details mean a lot. I think the work you do collectively with all operators, the leverage and influence that you have as well, being neutral and being able to bring regulators to the table, and also the credibility you have with the different governments and communities and regions. I think that is already an incredible asset for us. And this is why, we all want to be part of this family and benefit from that. Beyond that, I think you also need to remain neutral, as I said. And neutral doesn't mean just between OEMs, but also between types of vehicles. Because I think we will see more diverse vehicles coming in, and probably that will increase the scope of the associations. And I think you should also be evolving with that. But as I said, I think you're already helping a lot. I thank you for that, and I'm just looking forward to continuing this collaboration.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. The last question I have is for our association leaders, and I'll just basically go in order of who's on my screen here. So we'll start with Scott. What do we, as the industry associations, need to do to help foster and gain public acceptance? Because we all talked about public acceptance here in our presentations. What do we as the associations need to do to help gain public acceptance for this new technology? Scott, I'll start with you, sir.
So there's the first thing that sort of comes to mind is promotion. So and being inclusive and looking at integrating. So if we end up as staying in our current technology and promoting our current technology because we fear that this new technology is going to take away from us, then that is going to be detrimental. So I think that we need to start promoting that this is an alternate mode of transportation, which fits in with our current type of transportation that we know and love. I think that will go in some way to assisting it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yoshi, I'm sorry, Hiro. I got Yoshi on my screen here too. Hiro, same question to you, sir.
Yes, I think that first of all, we have to know our issues to share with our issues facing on the existing helicopters, whether these new vehicles associations, then we will commonly work together to find a way how to optimize the situation and to challenge for the new vehicles era. This is what I'm thinking about that.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Outstanding. And then Peter, last to you, sir. Same question. What can you do in Europe through the association to help promote this new technology?
I think the first and most important is, to convince our members, our operators, to have a close look at this new technology and to think about opportunities, business opportunities, how to include these new tools in their operation. As I said before, our operators, they do have the expertise in aviation, so they are the experts and they should make use of these new tools, include them in their operation, make business cases, and then have some kind of mixed operation, helicopters and the new tools.
Outstanding. Thank you. Gentlemen, that was the last question right there. And what I wanted to do is I just wanted to thank you. My sincere thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules to come join us here today. I personally, I really enjoyed this. I learned a great deal about, all aspects of what you have going on, especially considering the exciting horizons, if you will, of this new advanced air mobility sector. So again, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your input, and I wish you all the best day. And I'll turn it back over to Dan. Thank you, Dan.
So, hey, have to really express my appreciation, as always, to our panelists today. They did a truly brilliant job, and I can't begin to express my appreciation for them. Let's try to get things ready for the next slide here. There we go. Both to our panelists, Chris, Peter, Hiro, Scott, and Eduardo, always want to thank you for sharing your knowledge, sharing your experience, sharing your outlook and your thoughts on advanced air mobility around the world. It was certainly an eye-opener to hear some of the things. We're going to do our best to get some of the reports that Peter and Hiro had talked about, try to see if we can get those attached to the website at rotor.org/webinars. For those of you that are members, we'll be able to download the attachments, hopefully probably early next week. We do need to wrap up just a few things real quick. And so let me share my screen again. Next week, we've got another safety webinar coming in from the U.S. Helicopter Safety Team. This one will be a safety roundtable. There won't be any presentations as such. What do you want to know about the past, present, and future of VTOL safety, vertical takeoff and landing aircraft? Our panelists will be Jennifer Peasley from Air Methods, Bruce Webb from Airbus, Chris Lowenstein from Sikorsky, a Lockheed Martin company. Chris, we think is just about guaranteed, but I was told that there's a possibility we may have another representative from Sikorsky if he's not able to make it. Loreto Moraga, the Association Chilena de Helicóptero, and Francisco Escobar, also with the Chilean Helicopter Association. On September 16th, we have our latest Fly Neighborly training for people who operate Robinson R66 helicopters. And that will again be with Juliet from the Volpe Center. Look forward to hearing that one as well. We do have a follow-up questionnaire coming to you shortly. We do appreciate if you take just a few minutes to fill it out and let us know what you think of the webinars. You can certainly hammer me today for my little technical issues. Tell us what worked, what didn't work, what you'd like to see for future topics. We do take great deal of attention to that. We've been doing webinars now for about 18 months, and we're always looking for new ideas. If there's something that HAI can do to help you, or we're doing well, you want to tell us about it. If we're not doing it at all, let us know. Best way to do that is to get a hold of Jim Viola, the president and CEO of HAI, and tell him. The easiest way to do that is to use the email address president@rotor.org. And he does see each and every one of those emails that come in, and he does assign those to the staff for tasking. That does wrap it up for this week. We again are appreciative that you took the time to join us out of a busy schedule to watch this. And until next week, we ask that you be safe, you fly safe, and we'll see you very, very soon.